So today's live will be a very, very, very special live. I'm going to open you guys up to the true Kabbalah and give you guys a glimpse of what the true Kabbalah actually is, what it looks like. My last live, I detailed a little bit of the teachings and shared a little bit about my opinions on Western esotericism, so on and so forth. So I decided today I'm going to quote Sefer Y.I.R.A.H, and a little bit in honor of my chief disciple Shal Malcho, who officially has translated the entirety of Y.I.R.A.H for the very first time in completion. So we have the entire Y.I.R.A.H translated in an interlinear fashion. For those of you that don't know what Y.I.R.A.H is, Y.I.R.A.H meaning the tree of life is the central corpus of the Kabbalah. It was compiled by Chaim Vital, the chief disciple of the Arizal. So this first little portion that I'm going to read to you guys is from Y.I.R.A.H. This particular version of it came from I think it's the Arizal publication company. Yep, it was. So it was published by a publishing company called the Arizal. And we're going to read a certain portion from the contraction, emanation, and 10 Sefirot. And this is what he writes. The image of God. So he's talking about the Simsim, the restriction. He's going to be talking about the entry point of the 10 Sefirot inside of the contraction. Everybody here should be familiar with those concepts of the eliminable restricting itself. So now we will begin the second aspect of the 10 Sefirot, the linear aspect called Y.I.R.A.H, of light in the shape of 3 lines that form the image of a supernal human, the Adam Elyon. This line extends from top to bottom with the circles that we described above spreading out from it, and moreover this line extends straight from the top of the highest arc of the uppermost circle of all, down to the bottom of the lowest point of all circles, truly from top to bottom. It is composed of 10 Sefirot in the image of a human, standing straight, Yosher, including all 248 bodily parts. This is portrayed by 3 lines, right, left, and middle, comprising the 10 Sefirot in their entirety. Each and every one of these linear Sefirot is subdivided into 10 Sefirot, and so on without end. In the same way that we previously described the 10 circular Sefirot, this second aspect is called the image of God. A hint of this can be found in the scriptures where it says, and God created mankind, or Adam, in his image, in the image of God. So what we learn from this is that the Adam Elyon, the Adam associated with the Y.I.R.A.H, the straight light, is the composite of the 10 Sefirot in the image of a human being. Okay, this is one of the most guarded and secret aspects of all of the Kabbalah. So it's very clear. Chaim Vital is saying that the human being is made in the image of the primordial man, the Adam Elyon. The Adam Elyon is the image of a supernal human being. That is the malbush, or garment, or what he refers to here as the image of God. He continues. This linear Adam Kadmon has the appearance of a human, erect in its stature, consisting of 248 body parts, an upright figure with a head, arms, palms of the hands, a torso, and feet. It began to descend by way of the straight line from the infinite that surrounds it. From that point downward, it had the form of a human, consisting of the 10 linear Sefirot in 3 lines, right, left, and middle. He continues. We have now explained how this Adam Kadmon, with its circular and linear aspects, filled the whole empty, vacant, open place within the infinite. There remained, however, an empty space between the surrounding light of the linear aspects of the Adam Kadmon and the vessels, together with this linear inner light. That empty space is where all the worlds that emerged from this Adam Kadmon came into being and were emanated, all of which are dependent on, attached to this Adam Kadmon, and come forth from him. So we learn from this that the Adam Elyon is the image of a supernal human being, which is called the image of God. And that this is associated with what we call the Y.I.R.A.H, the very apex or beginning of all beginnings, in which the light first entered into the Tzimtzum or restriction, the place within inside of the infinite in which it contracted its own light and presence to create a vacancy where there was no vacancy, a differentiation where there was no differentiation. And that the pattern of the 10 Sfirot that had entered into this place was in the image of a human being. And this is called B'Tselem, meaning the image, as he writes here, of God. And so the image of God is this supernal Adam Elyon. And this is in correlation with those of you that have seen the last live where I quoted Moshe de Leon in his Sefer Rimonim when describing the secret of Yirah and saying that Yirah was the beginning of all beginnings. And this is the sod of what I said there when I stated that the numerical value of Yirah is the same as Adam Elyon. Now, he continues to state that this Adam Elyon, that all of the worlds came from him, through him, and by him, and are ultimately connected to him. And so this one supernal image of the divine Adam contains within inside of him all of the dimensions of existence and all of the universes as we understand them. Thus, from here, which is the Malchus of Malchut, meaning the lowest of all the lowest worlds, including all of the dimensions that are above us, are inside of a Partsuf, an arraignment of 10 Sfirot, which are in the image of a primordial man called Adam Elyon. And so the true Kabbalah deals with this Adam Elyon in particular. And we use a system called Ilanot. The term Ilan means a scroll to some people, but the actual root of the word of Ilan means a tree. And this tree is, as it is written, man is a tree. And we just learned that the 10 Sfirot take the image of a supernal man. And so therefore, the true study of Kabbalah requires what is called an Ilanot. An Ilanot is a scroll that maps out the worlds in the form of this divine Adam Elyon. Every single one of the scrolls will be dealing with the divine Adam Elyon. And so my intention behind sharing with you all today is to give you a glimpse of what that actually looks like, and then show you guys some Ilanot or scrolls over the last 1,000 or so years, so that you can actually see that what I'm saying is a true and authentic tradition, as opposed to the 99.9% of things that are today called Kabbalah. So I'm going to begin by prefacing there was excellent scholarship and excellent work that was done by a scholar at a university over there in Israel, who detailed the history and tracking of some of these Ilanot, some of these scrolls. And true Kabbalah requires these scrolls. Without these scrolls, it is absolutely impossible to actually engage in it. And it's one of the foremost reasons as to why I stated, and every time that I do these lessons and so on and so forth, that there really aren't any Mekubalim. There really aren't any Kabbalists. Now, the tradition stands that in order for you to actually become a Mekubal, in order for you to actually become a Kabbalist, you would have to receive the Ilan. And by that, I mean you would have to create the Ilan according to the authentic systems, and you would have to understand the ins and outs before you could actually engage in the science of Kabbalah. Without an Ilan, it is not possible to actually engage in Kabbalah. There are many people who study it, but that doesn't mean you're Mekubal. There are many people who engage or receive traditions from it, but again, that doesn't mean you're Mekubal. The tradition states that one is not considered a Mekubal until they themselves have the Ilan, meaning that the Adam Elyon is actually with them. And this is what is written according to the pattern that I showed you on the mountain, so on and so forth. And this is what's called in the Zohar an arrayed table, so on and so forth. So I'd like to show you guys first some of the scholarly work, and then I'll show you a glimpse of one of my first Elons. So this book right here, called The Kabbalistic Tree. For those of you that have never seen this book, I highly encourage you guys to obtain it. It's a masterpiece of scholarship, and it details real and authentic, true Kabbalah, and details it in its entirety throughout the history of its study for at least 1,000 years. And the best part about it is that it contains within inside of it some of the archived Elon note themselves, and so I'd like to just share those with you right now. Go ahead and remove the sleeve to prevent any damage here. So when dealing with the divine science, you're going to be it's going to be imperative that you have one of these scrolls. Okay, you guys can see one of them here. This particular scroll is from Italy. If you guys can see it here, maybe I can hold it up all the way. You guys can get a full glimpse of it. If you guys can see that there. Okay. Now, this is a brief example of one. This particular one is in association with what we call Y.I.R.A.H, or the Gates of Light. And this was a Kabbalistic text composited by Joseph Jikatilla, who was a disciple of Abraham Abulafia. And the Gates of Light details the mapping or the chambers or the hechalot of the Tree of Life, the array of the 10 Sefirot, alongside the divine names of God that are associated with them. And so here is the roadmap that was created specifically for it and dates to the time period and was written by the hand thereof. What's complicated in the situation is when you try to read these Kabbalistic texts without the map in which accompanied these types of esoteric works. In order for you to actually understand the Gates of Light, you would need the roadmap. Now, of course, people can read it and assume that they understand it, but one of the greatest traps in all of the mysteries, I think Albert Pike quoted this most exceptionally well in his lectures on the 32nd degree, Master of the Royal Secret, and he says, the blue degrees are the outer court or portico of the degrees. Part of the symbols are displayed there to the initiate, but he is intentionally misled by false interpretations. It is not intended that he shall understand them, but rather it is intended he shall imagine that he understands them, their true meaning being reserved for the adepts or princes of masonry, which of course, those are 2 degrees not conferred. The general point is that the higher mysteries are written in such a way that it is not intended that the person who receives them actually understands them. Rather, it is intended that the person who receives them will think that they understand them. And in the process of thinking that they understand them, remove them from actually understanding it. And now, why would you want to do that? And the answer to that is to keep away the profane. So that people that have flawed character traits, people that are mentally unstable, emotionally unstable, so on and so forth, don't actually gain access to the internal secrets. And so they're compiled in such a way that their own ego removes them away from the secrets themselves. Because their own ego thinks they understand. In their delusion, they think that they understand. And thus, by thinking they understand, they supplant and replace any real understanding. Thus, they themselves remove, as a safeguard, as it were, from the inner sanctorum. So this is our first Elon, and we're going to go into a couple of other ones. Now, later on in the development, we're going to look at the Adam Elyon in more specific detail. At this point, where it was as the composition of what's going on here, this one was attributed to Italy, and it was roughly circa 1600. And it details, for example, Rabbi Akiba going into the Hechalot with his friends, so on and so forth. And again, as I stated, it was for the Gates of Light. And although it depicts a depiction of the Adam Elyon, it's more often a general matter, right? Later on, though, especially Lurianic or post-Luria, it's going to get very detailed, because now we're not just going to be looking at the array of the 10 Sefirot and their names of God, but we'll actually be looking at the Partsufim. So I'm going to go ahead and show this one here, which was a combination of Maimon and Zacuto. Absolutely beautiful rendition of the Adam Elyon. Go ahead and see if I can hold this up here for you guys. Okay. You can see it's a Kabbalistic map of the worlds dealing with the primordial man. You'll see at the very top of it is a face. This face is a depiction of the Adam Elyon. In fact, it's going to say this at the very top of it, it says Kether of Adam Kadmon. Okay? Because again, in real Kabbalah, the entire structure of the worlds are a part of one giant supernal human being. And this, of course, the image of a human being. This is the Malbush or B'Tselem Elohim, the image of God, as it has been expounded before from Y.I.R.A.H. Again, this is the roadmap that you would need in order to actually engage and understand in authentic and true Kabbalah. And this is, again, the reason why I say there are no Kabbalists. Just because you study Kabbalah and just because you may collect Kabbalah or be a fan of it, or maybe even have received certain traditions from Kabbalah, meaning maybe you receive something from Y.I.R.A.H or so on and so forth, does not mean that you're actually a Mekubal. A true Kabbalist will have an Elon. They are not a Kabbalist without an Elon. If they do not have the supernal pattern of the Adam Elyon, they are not a true Kabbalist. And this is also one of the reasons why I said in the Western world, there really isn't any legitimacy here when discussing the nature of Adam Elyon and advanced Kabbalah, true and authentic Kabbalah. And the reason why is because essentially anyone here can have an opinion, and that's okay. But when we're talking about holy matters regarding the Holy Torah, so on and so forth, it is very important that the person that's teaching or the person that is speaking on these matters has actually entered into the inner sanctum themselves and have the fruit to therefore show of that fact. And that doesn't mean just even having an Elon, because just because you have an Elon, that doesn't qualify or make you a Mekubal either. You need to have made an Elon yourself and understood its mechanics, because that is the fruit of embodiment, and it's very important that one has the embodiment of these holy mysteries, these holy keys, because without that you can't really enter into the inner sanctum. So I'm going to show you some more examples of these Ilanot as we go through here. So these two here are also circa 1600s. This particular Elon right here is held in Tel Aviv. Okay. And again, you're going to see the supernal Adam Elyon. Okay. These are the maps of the worlds. And the beautiful thing is if you understand the true understandings, no matter which version of it you go to, you'll be able to recognize and track and see the exact same structures. When I go on here, I can immediately recognize where Y.I.R.A.H pin is, where Zeron pin is, his differentiations, Leah, Rachel, the Partzufim of Yaakov, so on and so forth, the spreading of the lights, because they all come from the same yichas. They all come from the same lineage, right? Kabbalah means to receive. If you've received the authentic lineage, then I can go back to a scroll almost 1,000 years ago, or I can go to this scroll right here, which is 500 years ago, and I can immediately identify what's going on here, completely read it and track its logic and reasoning, and see that it's completely compatible with the traditions 100 years from it, before it, or modern time. And that's very important. So we'll go on to another Elon. I'll give you guys another example of that. You can see some beautiful aspects of the Elon when dealing with the Simsums. The restriction, right? The restriction of the worlds. And again, real scholarship has not really been done on this subject. As I said, there really aren't any Mekubalim. And that also means really in Israel too. There are people who study Kabbalah, so on and so forth, but in terms of the orders and societies that actually held on to the Elonot, there's still a remnant. Don't get me wrong, without question, I can tell you that for a guaranteed fact. But most have no association to it, and that's very unfortunate. But this particular professor brought extreme scholarship to it, and that's what's so beautiful about it, is that he was really unbiased in his approach and really showed everything in it, because he did it in a scholarly way. So let me see if I can show you guys maybe one more Elon that was done a little bit after that. It's actually one of my favorite Elons, and it has to deal with here, I'll show you guys some more images. So it includes the images here of the Elon note, and these are massive scrolls. I mean, some of these scrolls, as I said, are 45 feet long. 45 is a very important number because 45 deals with the secret of Zeranpin. So you can see the images of the scrolls there. And again, because there's so much psychosis and mental delusion around Kabbalah and Western esotericism, that has absolutely debauched the real understanding behind it and replaced it with this bag of lies, and real scholarship surrounding authentic Kabbalah is virtually inaccessible except for maybe Sefer Y.I.R.A.H by R.A. Kaplan, if you're able to get that at Barnes & Noble, or some other Sefer Bahir, but again, that's an unintelligible text because it's not really expounded in an initiated way. Nonetheless, outside of that, there really isn't anything authoritative. And so the Western world, of course, here, as I'm speaking with you, basically has no understanding or insight regarding any of this stuff. And so what's happened is this once very holy inner thing has been replaced with this kind of bag of corruption. And that bag of corruption, again, has led into Western esotericism, which unfortunately has led into mass spiritual psychosis. Because when you think of that, you kind of think of like, oh, the tree of life, 10 sefirot. No. It was a very complex system that dealt with many different Partsufim, worlds, so on and so forth. It was a very complicated subject. It was not something that was just simple. Like the tree of life and how they kind of like, well, I'm just going to associate this to this sefirot and that to that sefirot. None of that's there. I'm not going to go into the rant about cultural appropriation behind it, but many of you guys were there and have already heard me go on about this matter. But I'd like to share with you guys just a couple more. This is a magnificent one. Okay, this is an Elon of Adam Kadmon, and this was in Munich. Absolutely incredible. And roughly it's from the same period. We're looking about 400 or 500 years old. So you guys can see the Elon scroll here. And it's always in the pattern of a divine human being. Okay? The Adam Elyon. Because we're made in the image of God. And God's image is the Adam Elyon, the supernal man. So that's what true and authentic Kabbalah looks like. Now, I'd like to show you guys some of my own personal scrolls. I've shown quite a few of them here. And I'd like to show you guys my very first one. I'm going to put that over here to the side. And this particular one is actually really interesting. So this isn't my actual manuscripted one, but you can see here, this one's from Rav Kaduri. Okay, so you can see again the scroll of the worlds. You're able to point them out. Here's the Partsufim of Rikain pin. Here's Zeran pin. There's Israel Saba Tavuna. There's Saba Tavuna Abba Ima. We have Partsufim's Leah and Rachel. We've got Partsufim's of Yaakov, so on and so forth. So it would be backwards here. So for you guys, this would be Partsuf Rachel, Partsuf Leah. This would be Partsuf Yaakov over here. This is the kind of the assemblage of Zeran pin. It's splitting up, so on and so forth, with the Partsufim's down below. Then we have the worlds of Berea, Yitzir, and Asiya, so on and so forth. So, so that's an example of it. Rav Kaduri was a major Mekubel very recently that showed that. So before I show you guys this massive Elon, which is a 45-foot Elon, I'd like to take just a brief second to answer any questions, if you guys have any questions.
So one user writes that you had made a video about the forbidden fruit of Adam and Eve, and they were wondering where they can find it.
On Skool, that's skool.com/Y.I.R.A.H, Y.I.R.A.H. You guys can find a link to it in my TikTok bio, and there you can find 450 plus private lessons, and as well as a version of an Elon yourself. So if you guys were here during the live I did with the Savant Gabriel, he digitized an entire Elon that I had shown to you guys all there, and he has sent me the files to upload to Skool. So there's 15 different tikkuns, and you can print them with your own printer and literally attach them together, and you can have an Elon yourself. If that's what you guys are interested in, you guys can find that in the link in my TikTok bio. Yeah, that's a great question.
Someone writes, can you please show the gold Elon? And another one asked, may you describe what your channel is about?
Sure. So I can definitely show you the golden Elon. That Elon came from Israel, and is according to the style of the Arizal. Rav Kaduri compiled his Elons in a very similar fashion. So I'll go ahead and show that with you all. And in terms of my channel is entirely dedicated to the most inner dimensions of Kabbalah. Technically speaking, something even above Kabbalah, because there are 3 levels. The oral, there's the oral Torah, written Torah. Then there's the mother's Torah, which we call Kabbalah. And then there's something called the Torah of Atzilut. And most of my teachings deal specifically with Torah of Atzilut, something that's even above what is currently known in terms of Kabbalah. But perhaps I'll show you guys the golden scroll. So give me 1 second.
Hi, Shoshana. She says hello.
Here, hold on. I'll take this. Okay, so give me a second. So if you guys see here, here's the golden Elon. For those of you guys that don't know, there's a cool little painting up there. And you guys can see it here. Okay? And so this is how you study real Kabbalah. And it's important for you to have access to an actual Elon. And of course, this is describing the Adam Elyon. And again, you'll see the partufim of a Rikain pin. And down below, you'll see the partufim of Zeron pin, so on and so forth. And this is obviously engraved. And you can read it too, the engravings, Gedula, Gabura. This is all a Rikain pin, like I was saying. Down here is the partufim of Zeron pin. You can actually read it here. If you look really closely, for those of you that can read the Hebrew, you're going to go ahead and see that right there. And you can actually see the words partsuf, right? And then you can see that it says partsuf Abba. And then right next to it says partsuf Ima. And then right here on the right, you can see, partsuf Israel Sabah. And over there, you can see partsuf Tavuna. And then you can see the construction of Zeron pin, so on and so forth. So that's the golden Elon there. We'll take you guys back over to the table over here. I'll answer a couple more questions.
Someone asked, what is Kabbalah?
Kabbalah is the received tradition that God gave to Moses on Mount Sinai. So when we say that Moshe received the Torah on Har Sinai, the word receive is Kabbalah, means to receive. And there are 3 things that he received on the mountain. The first one, of course, is the written Torah itself, which is a giant scroll, right? When you read the Bible, you think, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, but that was actually one giant scroll, a single scroll that was given to Moshe. The second part of it is the oral Torah, which we call the Shabbal Peh. That refers to the understanding behind what was written. And there was a third thing, which is alluded to in the Pasuk that says, create all these things according to the pattern that I showed you on the mountain. This teaches us that there was a secret pattern, or an image or diagram, that was shown to Moses on the mountain in order for him to understand the Torah. That's hinted at in the verse that says, they traveled to a place called Mara. There the waters of that place were bitter. Mara means bitter. And he showed them there a tree. He threw it in the water, and the bitter waters were made sweet. The pattern or diagram that he showed was the tree. And so the Zohar tells us that there isn't a single precept in all of the Torah that does not include all of the 10 sefirot. I won't go any deeper than that. But
what can we do with the drawing of those Elon if we can't fully comprehend?
that's why it's important to learn from a real mekubal. There really aren't any mekubalim, unfortunately, on TikTok, or really here in the Western world at all, for that matter. There are a lot of Western esotericists, but I've already explained how Western esotericism really doesn't exist. It's just kind of culturally appropriated Judaism. I've expounded how, for example, most of this stuff is influenced by Crowley, and Crowley obviously was a reject from the Golden Dawn. And then MacGregor Mathers, who was arguably one of the founders of the Golden Dawn, created all of the systems in there according to the Kabbalah, Jewish Kabbalah, where they essentially took all of the symbols of Kabbalah, an example, the Tree of Life and so on and so forth, culturally appropriated it, and then perverted it into the highest degree, just kind of tossing associations onto it or whatever they felt was associated to it. I mean, Liber 777 by Crowley is a prime example of its insanity. At least Crowley was somewhat smart enough to acknowledge that he regretted making that book because it made him look like a fool. But at least in the eyes of later in his life, where he came into some contact with some actual Mekabalim. Nonetheless, it's very important to learn it from an actual source, right? And when you learn the material, you have to learn from someone who has the actual Elon themselves. If they don't have an Elon themselves, it's extraordinarily dangerous to start understanding these deep and very complex mysteries, because you don't have an anchor or a roadmap. It would be like walking around in a forest without a map to know exactly where it is you're going. You need to enter into Pardes by someone who's entered the wisdom and left the wisdom in peace. Entering the wisdom means that they've done due diligence and studied all of the proper prerequisitary information and understands all of the concepts that are being delineated. Leaving the wisdom in peace meaning that they have now embodied the teachings and thus written a scroll or an Elon, which is the evidence or fruit of embodiment. And this is a very important piece. And so therefore, a person really, according to at least the traditions held regarding the receptions of the Elon notes, are in no position to even have an opinion on Kabbalah until they themselves have an Elon. Meaning, it doesn't matter if they've studied it, it doesn't matter if they've heard something or anything like that, they are not considered valid until they actually have an Elon. And being a Kabbalist doesn't mean you're a rabbi. Just because you're a rabbi does not mean you're qualified to have an opinion on Kabbalah. Unfortunately, there are plenty of rabbis that don't even really know the names of the Sefirot. So that's one distinction. And there are many other different distinctions on that, but I don't want to go too deep into it. So,
Someone writes, what do you think about Eliphas Levi? Hopefully I'm saying that right.
Eliphas Levi, he's a product of Kabbalah with a Q. That's just more kind of a cultural appropriation. The Christians had a problem because obviously when they were stealing all the secrets from the Jews, which is mainly all the Kabbalah, which all of their esoteric mysteries are built upon, it stood against pretty staunchly their belief systems. And as a result of that, they had to twist and distort things to kind of fit them into their narrative. And so therefore, Eliphas Levi really attempted to do that, for example, on his commentary on the book of Revelation, which he did a Kabbalistic commentary. I happen to have a copy of it. It's a very rare book. But it's really lackluster. He did a book on high ceremonial magic and so on and so forth. Of course, the infamous image of the Baphomet and everything like that. But from the initiated perspective, if you take Eliphas Levi at his time period, when the time period he was alive, and then you take like the Mekubel that was alive at that time period, I mean, we're not even in the same. They're not even in the same universe. The level of scholarship is just laughable, and it really becomes self-evident in their books because they're misspelling things. Their Hebrew is absolutely atrocious. They don't really grasp what they're saying. It's completely convoluted and polluted with other ideas that come from paganism, so on and so forth. So there's not really coherency or systematic explanations behind anything. There isn't a coherent system to anything that he's actually saying. It's all philosophical and it's lofty ideas, and it's kind of an amalgamation of a soup of ideas, but there's no coherent system. There's not a science or a map that was ever laid down by any of them in which the entire system would be structured, therefore, by. And the very few systems that they did get, for example, the 72 name of God, they stole from Judaism. The tree of life, they stole from Judaism, so on and so forth, and then kind of appropriated that information into their own kind of quasi, half Greek philosophy, half culturally appropriated Judaism, Neoplatonism. It's a hot mess, and it led to a lot of spiritual psychosis, and it still leads to a lot of spiritual psychosis. So my opinion on Eliphas Levi, I think that he had good intentions, but unfortunately is a charlatan. So, yeah. Well, I'm up to take maybe one or two more questions, and I'd love to show you guys one of the Elons. This is one of my first Elons. Not the first, but the first one that I wrote out of 45-foot length.
How do you spell Elon? Someone asked.
If you need to spell it in English, they usually spell it I-L-L-A-N, but that's not how it's spelled in Aramaic. It's Aleph Lam and Nun. So you'll, and again, it means tree. But yeah, you know what? I think there might actually be. There you go. So you can see it right there. Cha'ilan, Aleph Lam and Nun. For those of you that are wondering how to spell it in Hebrew, but in English you can type in I-L-L-A-N, I believe will give you a proper description on it. You guys can Google image search it, which will give you guys tons of examples of the Kabbalistic Ilanot scrolls, which most people in the Western world has never seen this stuff. And you look at like Western esotericism dates back into what? Arguably the 1800s, the 1900s, and then you look at the Ilanot, and you can go back 500 years very easily and see the Ilanot at that time, and see just the level and profound depth of the real God science, which they tried to base their stuff off of. Yeah. Okay, well, I think I'm going to go ahead and show with you guys one of my Elons. I'll have Malachi help me if that's okay. So to give you guys an example of the scroll, this is the scroll we're going to be pointing out here. You guys can kind of see its length here. It's pretty old, fairly large. And so I'll have my wife here handle the camera part. Maybe it might be best to just, okay, you can do that, yeah. There we go. Okay, so come on this side of me. I'm just gonna stand over here by the doors. Let's get a behind the scenes look going on here. Okay. Let's kind of get a glimpse of it. So I'll show you guys the modern side. Maybe on this side over here. Might be good. Okay. So I'll show you guys the modern side, and then I'll show you guys the traditional side. So here's the modern side. Let's pull that back a little bit there. Okay. Unfortunately, I can't even roll this out any farther than it actually is, but we're going to go ahead and do a favor. So this scroll isn't just one-sided, it's actually double-sided, so if you can just roll that over there, carefully flip. There we go. Okay, so now we're looking at classical Elon. So you can get a zoom in on that. All of this, of course, is written in Aramaic, and this is the traditional style that you'd be studying. If you guys are able to see that. Mal, if you want to roll it up on that side, we'll finish. We can show the bottom parts. And what you guys would want to see is the scroll in Aramaic and Hebrew. You don't want to see an Elon in English. Not that you can't have an Elon in English. I've written one in English, but you really can't get to the sub levels in English. You can use English as a buffer language to help explain the inner secrets, but the inner secrets are really only available in Hebrew, and Aramaic is this kind of partner language as it relates to the Zohar song and so forth to understand it. So as he rolls that up over there, I'll slowly be able to show you guys the rest of it. Now keep in mind, these scrolls were written in 7 days. From beginning to end. Every one of these scrolls were made in exactly 7 days. And we can see the primordial Simsum. This is the Partsufim of a refine pin, which you guys will see down below. The 231 gates. Let's pull that back there to therapy, back to the wall, so we can show this portion over here. So if you can see over here, we have the 231 gates. Then we have the Simsum, the Shorosh of the letters Aleph and the letter Yod, the primordial Nikud or point. This is a classical representation of the Simsum. It's a composite of all the first letters of all the Sfirot. So that's a Kaf for Keter, a Chet for Chokmah. Then we have the letter Beit for Bina, Dalet for Da'as, right? Chet for Chesed, Gimel for Gavura, Tifres, Netzach, Hod. Except for Yisod here, it's represented by the letter Tzadi, which is the Sadiq, and then Malkut. And so this is the first letter of all the Sefirot. This is what it looks like from another perspective, but they're basically insinuating the same things. Okay. The next portion is talking about the 7 kings of Edom, the construction of Y.I.R.A.H Pins Partzuf, Zoran Pins Partzuf. And now this is the bottom of the Elon here. And so you can actually see the Nukva, and then this is the Partsuf for Sandalphon and Asiya, Metatron and Yetzirah, Ekatariel, which is in Berea. Then we have aspects with inside of the Nikud, which are in Berea, and then the primordial Partsufim, which are above it, and it goes up that way. So this is, and again, this is still all double-sided. You know, if you guys can see the very back side of this entire Elon. And that's because I've done 2 renditions of it. One rendition is classical, which is important for you to have gone through the classical initiation and understanding of the real Elons. And then the other Elon is bringing out the scientific level and kind of modernizing it, which is what I've done on the other side of it as well. So it's important to have come from both sides. I would not suggest modernizing an Elon without first having gone through the classical understandings behind it. So if anyone has any questions while we're rolling this scroll up, I'm happy to go ahead and answer a couple.
And again, you guys can learn this powerful information and the scroll work and all the true Kabbalistic mysteries from his school. He created a school, and that's skool.com/Yirah if you're interested.
Yes, the Skool.com, you can find it in the link in my TikTok bio. And if you're interested in learning the authentic traditions, I would suggest you guys go over there. If this is what you guys are seeking.
Someone asked, what is it used for?
It's used for the study of the Torah. So basically, it's a map of the Bible code. This is literally describing the Bible, right? So Genesis, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. In fact, that's actually what we're looking at. Here, I'll give you guys an example. Hold on right here, okay? Here, scroll back. Oh, okay, yeah, that's good. Okay, so if you see this top part over here, this is Genesis, right? Bereshis bara Elohim et hashamayim v'haaretz. Now, if we come over here, this first partsuf is a partsuf associated with Bereshit. You'll see the very first verse. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'haaretz. You'll notice that there's an array of 10 sfirot, because Bereshit alludes to Chokmah, as it's written, Yirat Hashem Rashit Chokmah. So the word beginning Y.I.R.A.H alludes to the sphere of Chokmah. Bara alludes to the sphere of Bina, which is called the world of Berea. The name of God associated to Bina is the name Elohim. Thus it says, Bereshis bara Elohim, in the beginning created Elohim, or created God. Et Hashamayim is Zoran Pin, called the heavens. Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yisod. And Y.I.R.A.H is Malkut. So this whole partsuf here is the Shorosh, or root, of the very first word in Genesis. Bereshis, in the beginning. The next word, bara Elohim, is alluded to here by the 32 times the name Elohim is mentioned in the book of, in the days of creation. So if you, in the book of Genesis, in the days of creation, the name Elohim is mentioned exactly 32 times. They refer to the 10 sfirot and the 22 interconnecting paths. Beneath this is the word Shemayim, or Ha-Shemayim, the heavens. This is an allusion to the Parsufim of Zeranpin. And beneath this is Y.I.R.A.H, and the earth. Now there are 7 heavens that are listed, and there are also 7 earths that are listed. And so then right here is the restriction of the 7 earths, right? We have Tevel, Arka, Tzayan, Shaya, Gaia, Daman, Eretz. And then beneath that is Y.I.R.A.H, and the earth was Tohu, Vabohu, Vachoshek, Olpene Tahom. So on and so forth. And so for you to really understand Genesis, you need a map. What exactly is the Bible talking about? It's the real Bible code, the real Torah code. I don't like using the term Bible, but here for the Western audience, I'll use it. It's the real Bible code and how to understand what is actually there. And you need a map to navigate it. And so the Elon or scroll is to do precisely that. It's to navigate and map out. And so everything on this scroll was the days of creation. Everything that you guys just looked at was the entire map of the 7 days of creation. Okay, perfect. Get this maybe back over here. So I don't have too much longer to spend with you all, but I hope that you guys were able to receive a little bit of a glimpse of what the actual divine science looks like, and were able to take away and understand a little bit about the Adam Elyon and what authentic and real Kabbalah looks like. Unfortunately, as I said, Kabbalah has a terrible connotation. They associate it with the occult. They associate it with New Age mysticism. And really, we're talking about something that's more ancient than any of these religions. And it's been given a very negative name and a negative association because of Western esotericism, which has culturally appropriated these sacred symbols like the Tree of Life, so on and so forth, and then applied them to nonsense. They've created entire defunct, demonic, magical practices and spiritually inducing psychosis forms of theological mappings in their books and systems and secret societies and public societies that they've formed from it. But most people have never actually seen real Kabbalah. I can ask you guys, have any of you guys seen those kinds of scrolls before? Or when you guys hear the word Kabbalah, do you just think of, the 10 Sefirot of the Tree of Life that are associated there? And the answer to that question is probably not. And that's because they were heavily guarded. They were very holy, very sacred. Those scrolls are very holy, and they're held in the highest regards by the most illuminated of Rabbanan. And they were not available to the public. It was an extraordinarily close practice. It was very secret. And so the Western world, unfortunately, up until now, really has had next to zero interactions with that hidden tradition. And so when we look at it, we kind of think of we think, oh, well, they're just thinking about which threads not to wear and this and that. And, we look at Judaism as kind of this ancient archaic thing, but in its most inner echelons and amongst the most advanced. And I'm not talking about the level of rabbi. I'm talking about the most inner mechubalim. They've been dealing with this hidden divine God science, and they've been dealing with this hidden divine God science for thousands of years in secrecy, and it isn't until really recently that it's starting to surface the real thing, and not the culturally appropriated nonsense that bears its name. So I'll take just a couple of minutes to answer any last questions, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up.
What is the practice? When did you start this journey?
At a very, very, very young age. The entirety of my entire adult life has been dedicated to this. I've been publicly teaching Kabbalah for around 7 years now. But before that, I was privately attesting and writing my tomes and manuscripts from a very young age, and I've written many massive tomes, like, you know, these huge, huge manuscripted tomes that look like something from the 1300s. Ironically, the bookbinder that did all of my bookbinding, he is 13 generations, and he did many bindings for kings and queens and very high up people, and does them in a 13th century style. I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen my my actual tomes that I've done before I actually began teaching any of the Kabbalah, but maybe one of these lives I'll go ahead and entertain that and share with you guys those.
What do you think about the flower of life?
The flower of life contains inside of it the tree of life, and it's all interconnected. The flower of life is arguably evidence of the tree of life's existence, and it's very ancient. However, the flower of life has been culturally appropriated as well, right? So when you go back into ancient times and you look at the places where the flower of life is found at, you know, there's allusions to it in Egypt, and there's allusions to it in Sumeria, but, you know, the flower of life has now kind of been adopted by the new age, filled with all of this weird inserted philosophy. Basically, in short, what I'm saying is it's something incredibly ancient that has been intermixed with modern nonsense. So I definitely would encourage you guys to look up the legitimacy behind the flower of life. If you guys look at the seed of life and so on and so forth, and look at how cellular development is and how cellular mitosis and the splitting of cells relates to this development of the flower of life, and then notice the tree of life in the flower of life, you'll be absolutely amazed. I also encourage you guys to look at the ancient places in which it was used at. But, you know, I would be kind of wary about any of the, you know, new agey types that have the purple background and the flower of life on there, or they have, yeah. Again, to each their own. You're welcome to do as you wish, but there's a lot of spiritual psychosis bleeding out of that stuff.
Naeem, questions are being answered. Please feel free to ask a question if you do have one. A user writes, is it Elohim or Yahuwah?
So Y.I.R.A.H is not mentioned at all in Genesis. This is a very important distinction, because the version of the Bible that we have is entirely corrupted. There's not a single, you guys are going to be blown away by this. There's not a single Bible in English that has what is truly written in it. I can tell you this because all of the Bibles that we have are based off of the Septuagint. And our sages tell us in the Talmud that, so for those of you who give you background for Septuagint, what is Septuagint? Septuagint means the 70, and it basically refers to the 70 elders that were kind of gathered and under pain of death under the rule of Ptolemy, who was one of Alexander's generals over there in Egypt when he took that place over, demanded that the Torah scroll be translated into Greek. Okay, so they got together and under pain of death created the Septuagint, which is just the Torah, not the Old Testament. All that other nonsense in Greek, that didn't exist, just the first 5 books. But in order to discern who was real and who wasn't real, they altered a couple of things, and these alterations are actually mentioned by our sages in the Talmud explicitly. And here's a couple of the things that they changed. First off, anyone who's read the Hebrew would know that 70 souls enter Yaakov into Mitzrayim, into Egypt, right? This is when we read the beginning of Exodus or Shemus. 70 souls enter with Yaakov. However, they changed that number in the Septuagint. And this same error appears in the Christians' New Testament, because in their, I want to say it's the book of Acts, one of the followers over there makes this quote, and he cites the wrong number of souls that entered into Egypt, telling you that 1, he didn't know Hebrew, 2, he really wasn't a Jew in the sense of Judaism and of the ancient Hebrew lineage, that he was one of these Alexandrian Greek Jews, and he studied the Septuagint, which had this error intentionally put into it in order so that they could differentiate who was real and who wasn't real. So obviously he quotes the wrong number of souls that go into Egypt, and this is in the New Testament. But nonetheless, one of the things that they change, another thing that they change, is the reading of the first verse where it says "Bereshis bara Elohim." It literally reads, "In the beginning created Elohim," right? But they changed the wording for the Septuagint reading so that it says, "In the beginning Elohim bara." In the beginning, God created. And to this day, every Bible you open up will say, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." But that's not what the Hebrew says at all. The Hebrew says, "Bereshis bara Elohim." In the beginning was created Elohim, insinuating God was created, or Elohim was created. And that's problematic, which is exactly why the Septuagint changed. One, to keep away those mysteries, and two, as they lightly argue, to prevent heretical understandings. Nonetheless, that secret of Bereshis bara Elohim still persists inside of the deep echelons or the high echelons within the Kabbalah. And it certainly is that way. So any Torah scroll is going to read Bereshis bara Elohim. But the Septuagint is corrupted. And so the version of the Bible you all read is also corrupted. And what's that app that I had a friend telling me about it? Bible Hub. He tried showing me something from Bible Hub. That thing's also entirely corrupted. If you'll look at the very first verse, for example, the first pasuk that I mentioned, Genesis 1:1, it's entirely corrupted. They've actually changed the Hebrew to match their nonsense translations. So it's entirely and utterly unreliable. I absolutely would avoid that at all costs. But yeah, so there's a lot going into that. There's a lot going into that. Okay, you guys. I maybe have time for one or two last questions, and then I'm going to go ahead and conclude. But it's been wonderful spending time with you all. I hope that you guys were able to get a glimpse of a very ancient, profound system of biblical study regarding the esoteric levels of the Sefer Torah, what real Kabbalah looks like, give you an example of the scrolls and the Elons, and hopefully educate you guys a little bit as to what to look for when trying to discern or study these types of teachings.
Someone writes, did you hear of Cipher of Genesis, and do you sell any of these books?
So yes, I have published around 13 books, but if you guys go to Skool, skool.com/Y.I.R.A.H, Y-I-R-A-H, you guys can find it in the link in my TikTok bio. On the second tier, I've made over 20 of my works completely free to all members that go there. And that's in a version of a PDF format. We've also included the entirety of the Malchut Zohar, which is 12 volumes and is the only full unredacted translation of the Zohar in the world. Every version of it is censored except for that version. And amongst other things. So I do have books that are available. You guys can just look up Sefer Yirah, Likutei Yirah. You guys can also obtain them from Skool.com. The link in my TikTok bio. There, those premium members just receive all of the books for free as a digital download. And but you can obtain physical copies of it. Some of them are on Amazon, and some of them are on BookBaby themselves.
So the website where he teaches is skool.com/Yirah, and Skool is spelled with a K, so it's SKOOL.com/YIRAH.
Yes.
And you can also find the link to these websites in his bio.
Okay. Well, again, thank you guys all for joining. Thank you guys for being here. I hope that this was educational for you all. If there was anything that I hope that you guys took away from this, it's just to give you a glimpse of this ancient system and to give you an idea of what true and authentic Kabbalah looks like. I'm thankful for being able to share this particular scholarly work with you all and to have shown you all of the Elon note that are inside of them so that you guys have a more educated understanding regarding what you should see when someone says that they're talking about Kabbalah, so on and so forth. And hopefully it gives you guys a better level of discernment when investigating these matters. There's a lot of dangers into looking into this type of study when they come from illegitimate sources or they come from illegitimate teachers. So thank you all for joining with me today, and I hope to be able to see you guys soon. As David Amelech said, open my eyes and I behold the wonders of your Torah. Amen, everyone. Shalom and salah.